Hello, and welcome back to Story Time with Eric Zimmer. Our next classic is yet another famous one of Dr. Seuss's, also from 1957. And, oh, yes! How the Grinch Stole Christmas, made into a 1966 animated short directed by Chuck Jones, and two Emmy-winning iterations under directors Gerald Baldwin, with the 1977 short Halloween is Grinch Night, and Bill Perez in 1982 with The Grinch is the Cat in the Hat. A crossover. And then there was a live-action 2000 movie directed by Ron Howard starring Jim Carrey. That one was pretty good too. And then 2 years ago, they made another one from Illumination Entertainment. It was decent, but it does not hold a candle to the live-action movie from 2000. Or any of the animated specials. But anyways, we're not watching any of that. We're reading the original classic. So you ready? Alright, let's begin. And one other thing. Both the special and the movie are something I watch every year, along with many other specials. But that's just me. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. Read along if you know the words. The Grinch hated Christmas the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be that his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm-lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here. Then he growled with his grinchy fingers nervously drumming, I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. Tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early, and they'd rush for their toys, and then, oh the noise, noise. That's one thing he hated, the noise. Then the Whos, young and old, would sit down to a feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast. They would feast on Who pudding, and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Whos would start singing. They'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat, and he chuckled and clucked. What a great Grinchy trick! With his coat and this hat, I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around, but since reindeer are scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No. The Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max, and he took some red thread, and he tied a big horn on top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up to old Max. Then the Grinch said, "Get up!" and the sleigh started down towards the homes where the Whos lay a snooze in their town. All the windows were dark. Quiet snow filled the air. All the Whos were all dreaming sweet dreams without care when he came to the first little house on the square. "This is stop number 1, said the old Grinchy claws hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, and so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once, for a moment or two, then he stuck his head out at the fireplace foo, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. The stockings, he grinned, were the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk, with a smile most unpleasant, around the whole room, and he took every present. Pop guns, bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn, and plums. And he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch, very nimbly, stuffed all the bags one by one up the chimbley. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took the last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. And now, grinned the Grinch, I'll stuff up the tree. Then the Grinch grabbed the tree and he started to shove, when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. Uh-oh. I hope he doesn't blow his cover. Anyways, he turned around fast and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou Who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who'd got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why? But you know, that old Grinch was so smart and so slick. He thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. Why, my sweet little tot, the fake Santa Claus lied, there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side. So I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, and then I'll bring it back here. I just noticed his hat's not colored in. Oh well, no worries there. And his fib fooled the child, and he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went up the chimney. He went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. And the last thing he took was the log for their fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On the walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And the one speck of food he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. In the animated special, he took the crumb away from the mouse. But in the live-action movie, he took the mouse. I don't know why I just thought of that. Anyways, then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. Aww. Poor little things. It was 1:15 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a-snooze when he packed up his sled. Packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings and the trappings. 3,000 feet up, the side of Mount Crumbit, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-pooh to the Who's, he was grinchishly humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I just know what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open for a minute or two. And then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry boo-hoo. That's the noise, grinned the Grinch. that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his head into his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, and it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, this sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry. Very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, were singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Well, you can't stop Christmas. Somehow or other, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, and bags. And he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, needs a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast, and he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. What a nice story. Another one of his best. Oh. And it just goes to show you, you don't need presents or fancy things or food to celebrate Christmas. As long as we have each other. That's what's important. The end. See you next time on Story Time with Eric Zimmer.